Well, hi, everybody. Happy Friday. It's the last Friday in February. And I don't know about you, I'm so excited. It just means spring is that much closer. Oh, man. Sorry about the rooster tail. It's part of being a puppy mama. So I'm going to just share my screen with you. And today I want to talk about how to categorize your expenses on your tax return and your bookkeeping software. I hear so many people say, I don't know how to categorize my expenses. And really, I never know if they mean they're having trouble categorizing expenses in their bookkeeping system or on their tax return, but I'm assuming both. So let's take a look at what types of expenses you have and where they go in your bookkeeping system and how they transfer over onto your tax return. If you stick around till the end of this video, you'll learn about 5 different types of expenses that just about every handmade business owner could have, how to categorize them, and where to put them on your tax return. Hi there, I'm Nancy Smith, aka the YarnyBookkeeper, and I help handmade, creative, and craft business owners get a handle on their bookkeeping. So if you stick around, I have an expense cheat sheet that I'll be sharing at the end of this video. You can either comment or send me a DM with the word expenses, and I'll get it to you. So, are you confused about your expenses? I mean, are you having more trouble categorizing expenses in your bookkeeping system or on your tax return or both? Just let me know in the comments, okay? Now, this week's video contains timely tax time topics, and it's all about expenses and reporting them on your tax return, which I hope is going to be very manageable for you. So, most handmade, creative, and craft business owners will have 5 types of expenses or things that they spend money on, and they all go in different places when you file your tax return. So the first type of expense that you'll have is an asset or an equipment purchase. So when you buy equipment, furniture, or fixtures that each have a value of $500 or more, like a computer, maybe a high-end sewing machine, a spinning wheel, a loom, desk shelving, etc. These assets are things that your business owns that have value, and it's reporting on your balance sheet if you're using bookkeeping software. Otherwise, you keep a list of what you bought, when you bought it, and what you paid for it if you're using spreadsheets. Expense type number 2 are inventory purchases. Okay, so when you buy materials that you keep on hand for future use, that's even if you don't know what you're going to use it for yet, that's inventory. So think of all that yarn you have in your stash. Yep, that's inventory. It's also an asset, and it's reported on your balance sheet if you're using software. If you're using spreadsheets, you need to keep a detailed listing of what you bought, how much you bought, when you bought it, what you paid for it, and how much of it you've used. The third type of expense that we have is a cost of goods sold or cost of sales expenses, okay? Now, cost of goods sold, cost of sales, both of those things mean the same, even though they got 2 different titles. These expenses are reported on your profit and loss report and include all the things that you spend money on to make and sell your finished items or your patterns. These expenses can happen before, during, and after you make or sell the item or pattern. Now, makers and designers have different types of cost of goods sold, cost of goods sales expenses. For instance, before you sell anything, designers might pay for tech editing or photography, while makers might pay for a craft fair booth. Indirect materials, little stuff that you don't keep in inventory, patterns that you purchase to make finished items with, okay? Designers can claim or expense the cost of their materials as soon as the pattern is ready for release. Makers can't claim or expense the cost of materials until they sell the finished items. So that means you have to keep those detailed records of how much it cost you to make each item that you sell. Now, it's likely both makers and designers will both pay merchant fees after you make the sale, and makers may pay shipping to deliver the finished item to the person that bought it. Okay, I know this is a lot to take into consideration, right? So the fourth type of expense that you'll have are your general or your overhead expenses. These are all the things that you spend money on to run your business. You know, things like website hosting, office supplies, courses, memberships, okay? And then the fifth type of expense that you may have, and this one's kind of tricky because they cost your business money, but you don't pay for them. Okay. So think of things like a stolen or damaged item at a craft fair, or God forbid, your house flooded or burned and you lost all of that yarn. Okay. So now that you know about the 5 different types of expenses that you might have, let's see where they're reported on your tax return. Is this making sense to everybody? Just let me know in the comments. Okay. All righty. So let's talk about reporting those asset purchases on your tax return. Now, again, those are those big ticket items that you bought that have an individual value of $500 or more, and they're reported on a special form number 4562. It's called depreciation and amortization, which is attached to your Schedule C and then ultimately your personal 1040 tax return. It's an extra form, and it's really kind of a nasty one. And that's because the IRS decides on how many years each of the items you purchase will last. So they may say something will last 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Now, what this means is you can only take a portion of the cost of the item you bought over a set number of years. That's called depreciation. So if you bought a $900 sewing machine and the IRS thinks it will last 7 years, you only get to take a deduction of about $128 a year for the next 7 years under something called depreciation. Other times you can take the full amount under a special kind of depreciation called a Section 179 deduction. All of this will make your toes curl, and be very careful of tax software programs. I've seen some very bad advice in their help documents. So do yourself a favor, talk to a CPA, and make sure you keep a list of what you bought each year. Okay, so now we're going to talk about reporting inventory and cost of goods sold. So both of these are reported in Part 3, cost of goods sold, on your Schedule C. It's really not anything more than one big old math formula that pulls numbers from both your profit and loss and your balance sheet reports, starting with the value of your beginning inventory, which includes both materials and finished items, on line 35, and then ending with the value of your ending inventory on 12/31. And again, that's both for materials and finished items, and you report that on line 41. The actual cost of goods sold, cost of sales from your profit and loss report get reported on lines 37, 38, and 39. Oh, one very important thing, make sure you're keeping track of what you took out of inventory for your own personal use, because that gets thrown in this math problem too. So let's talk about reporting general and overhead expenses. That's all the stuff that you use or buy to make your business run. So that's reported on your Schedule C in Part 2, expenses. Now, the IRS provides standard categories that apply to most businesses, but not necessarily handmade businesses. I think this is where most handmade, creative, and craft business owners get hung up with the, I don't know how to categorize my expenses. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Some of us will have expenses that do fit in these categories, and then everything else gets listed in Part 5, other expenses, and then the total from there is brought over to line 27A in Part 2. So do yourself a favor and don't let that negative thought of, I don't know how to categorize my expenses, and learn about what kind of expenses go into these standard categories, and then how to group similar expenses and report them in that other expenses section. So remember, if you comment expenses, I'll send you a Post-it note list that I've come up with to help you figure this all out. Oh, sorry, my slide says cheat sheet. Either one, cheat sheet or expenses. So let's circle back to those other expenses, the tricky ones that cost your business money, but you don't pay for them. So let's say something is stolen or damaged at a craft fair. The cost of those items could very well be reported in Part 5, other expenses on your Schedule C. If your house floods or burns and you lose all that yarn, we'll talk to a CPA. Okay, I'm not going to give you tax advice on that. But when you report something that is stolen or damaged, you can only deduct what it cost you to make the item that was stolen or damaged. Okay, has this helped demystify that whole, I don't know how to categorize my expensive things? Let me know in the comments. And if you have questions, well, post them there too. Okay, that's it for this week. Comment cheat sheet or expenses, and I'll send you that Post-it note list of expenses and categories I've come up with to help you categorize your expenses. Need or want more help? Well, click the link in my bio and check out the Handmade Business Bookkeeping Breakthroughs course. It will really help you out because I go into all of this in way more detail. Join me next week when I talk about a beginner's guide to craft business bookkeeping. That's it. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you next week.